Greetings, welcome and hello. We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we are going to look deep into this particular book again, titled Maori Symbolism by Ettie A. Rout, and the evidence of tohunga or mystic, Maori mystic, Hohepa Te Rake, who risked his status to bring the sacred teaching of old, etc., to all. New Zealand, especially Te Arawa Iwi, or the Te Arawa tribe, also known as the Irihia. This is your religion, according to this woman, and the evidence brought by Hohepa Te Rake related to her and Arawa noble. Who again risked his chiefly status, or his status, to reveal all the sacred knowledge. You are originally of the Assyrians, who left that country in the Middle East and travelled down here to New Zealand, Aoteoroa. Here we will show you the evidence as we browse through this book. This book is dedicated to my fellow countrymen, the New Zealand Maori. Turn your face to the sun and the shadows will fall behind you, Maori proverb. Contents page, prefaced by Sir William Arbuthnot Lane. This is credentials, foreword by Hohepa Te Rake, reporter's introduction, and part 1, 2, 3, and so on. Continued. List of illustrations, portrait of the author, etc. Prefaced by Sir William Arbuthnot Lane, Bart CB, MS Consulting Surgeon to Guy's Hospital, etc. A careful reading of the manuscript of this book convinced him that it was one of the most valuable reports ever prepared regarding the natural mode of life of mankind. Long surgical experience has proved to him conclusively that there is something radically and fundamentally wrong with the civilized mode of life, and he believed that unless the present diet, ethic and health customs of the white nations are reorganized, social decay and race deterioration are inevitable. It is almost impossible to exaggerate the mass of personal misery and national loss which follows upon the neglect of intestinal health. The New Zealand Maori view that the bowels are clean, the whole body is clean. That when the bowels are clean, the whole body is clean. It's perfectly sound scientifically, and its ethical significance is far wider and greater than most of us imagine. And he talks more about that and the reasons why we should have that clean body, clean innards, etc. The natural remedies, or rather the preventives, were clearly known to the ancient Maori. By diet and by exercise, the abdominal and pelvic muscles of Maori kept themselves physically fit and healthy. If the so-called civilized nations of the present day could be persuaded to adopt the Maori diet, abundance of fruit and vegetables, course meals with occasionally a little fish or bird, this particular person believed most firmly that the cancer problem among the white nations would cease to exist. There was no cancer among the New Zealand Maori or any other native race, so as long as they lived their own natural life. He continues with that. Here's a foreword by the tohunga, Hohepa Te Rake. In ancient days it would have been a crime to publish the sacred knowledge of my race, or his Maori race, and for such an offence a chief would have been stripped of noble rank. But in the course of his travels he had found that the people of all civilized countries regard the New Zealand Maori as a native, i.e. a savage. The English may talk of him as a fine man, but in their hearts they consider the Maori an inferior and a member of a backward race. It is desirable therefore to establish the facts of Maori culture. And he goes into that further. Reporter's introduction has been Ettie Stout. The major portion of the evidence in this report has been furnished by Hohepa Te Rake, but she endeavoured to record corroboration wherever possible, and herself selected the illustrated matter. She also compiled the glossary and index and tried to make both as accurate and useful as possible, but any amendments and improvements that can be suggested by students would be welcomed. The object of publishing this report was to preserve permanently some of the world's sacred legends, similar to those which have perished in the sagas and other lost and forgotten oral traditions. Hitherto, it is almost entirely the secular traditions of the ancient Maori, the songs and the recitations of the people, not the law and sacred legends, which have been recorded in the numerous books written by Europeans about the Maori. Thus, many misconceptions have grown up, and it will not always be easy to secure unbiased consideration for some part of this report. Never in the history of European civilization have the sacred legends of any native race received the careful and respectful recording that should have been given, and for lack of this, many priceless legends have gone forever. With love of truth and desire for knowledge, many Europeans combine a curiously intense hostility to new facts and an implacable hatred of ethical and economic principle differences from those on which they suppose civilization to be established and maintained. In addition, they are hampered by the most amazing credulity in regard to the alleged beliefs and customs of those peoples they term natives, and by a false sense of superiority over all other peoples of all times. This combination neutralizes the moral benefits that might otherwise result from the acquirement of new knowledge. In this report, Ettie A. Rout was not stating any set opinions or theories of her own, and she did not exclude evidence. She hasn't excluded evidence which others may misinterpret. For example, in regard to the Jews, she is not suggesting that the Maori are Jews, rather that they are Israelites. One may realise the indebtedness of the world to the Jews for the preservation of the Hebrew legends, while at the same time suspecting that this literature no more belonged to them than the philosophy of Jesus belongs to the so-called Christian nations. Her endeavour throughout had been simply to record accurate evidence and fair comment, record all faithfully and completely. In this way, only the worth of the ancient Maori civilization would be revealed. And certainly she hoped in her day that this report would do something to counteract the many foolish and disgraceful untruths through which Maori culture has hitherto been so deplorably misunderstood. She also felt that the method of correct reporting would best aid scholars and scientists in the comparative study of mankind, and best aid the medical authorities who are endeavouring to benefit the health of Europeans by making known to them the superior hygienic wisdom and health practices of native races. But most of all, her desire as a New Zealander, she's actually an Australian who came here, came to New Zealand, migrated here, has been to rescue from oblivion the sacred knowledge of her ancient Maori compatriots. In that day, the few unspoilt survivors of the ancient Maori nobility beheld the deterioration of their race, the crumbling of their customs, and the wreckage of their lofty social ethics and religion. Down the gulf of time, the ancient culture threatens to disappear. Not a year is to be lost if we would record what were the foundations of this life of the past, for the centuries to come will be increasingly less qualified to understand and appreciate the place occupied in the world of man by the New Zealand Maori, the bravest of all travellers, the greatest of all discoveries, and the most enduring successful of all nation builders. It is true that the sacred health law is recorded only in abbreviated written form, and that for the most part its preservation is dependent on recitation. But every etymologist knows that sound rather than spelling is the safest record. Further, to the ancient New Zealand Maori, such oral traditions were a sacred trust successfully transmitted from one generation to the next for thousands of years. The Maori remembrance in this respect is the noblest fulfilment of national obligation the world has ever known. Now less at languishes. In the few native reserves left to them in New Zealand, there are ancient Maori elders struggling valiantly to impress on the present generation the importance of still memorising the sacred legends, but these elders are slowly and tragically sinking into despair and death as the members of the present generation become increasingly Europeanised. The trained memories which were the trustworthy vehicle for so long are becoming fewer and fewer. Soon none will be left. For this reason, Ettie A. Rout chose not memory but the printed report for recording this evidence and endeavouring to make it honourable, accurate and reverent. So she wasn't trying to pull a wool over anyone's eyes. No Hufflepuff lies. The reporting of these legends had involved more than 12 months incessant work by her, and the revising, illustrating occupied a further period of 12 months, altogether some 2 years, in addition to years of study in New Zealand. And yet she recorded only a very small portion of the sacred legends of the ancient Maori, only as much as her limited funds permitted, and so forth. Trying to get to the part where she talks about Hohepa Te Rake. It may be explained that in the course of this evidence, several matters about marriage, civilization, etc., go up a bit further. Maybe he explained that in the course of the evidence above, several matters had arisen which could not be adequately dealt with in this particular report, without overloading the report with matter more in the nature of comment than evidence. The most important of these are as follows. 1. Vanished peoples. It is frequently alleged that the ancient inhabitants of East Island, Peru and elsewhere have vanished without leaving any trace of themselves beyond the megalithic buildings. These inhabitants did not vanish. They peopled Polynesia and the Americas long ages before these parts of the earth were discovered by modern Europeans. Their life symbolism they took with them, their dead property, buildings and so forth, they did not regard as wealth and left it behind for the astonishment of those who have not yet learned to know and value life for themselves. 2. Sun cults. The sacred temples of the ancient Maori, as well as other buildings erected for sacred purposes, that is for religious and scientific purposes, were oriented at noon on the March solstice. And you can look at pages 130 and 293 of this report, this book. The purpose was astronomical chronology, not superstitious magic or sun worship, whatever may be meant by that hackneyed and overworked term. 3. Megaliths. There were 2 methods of building and carving, these which, to the best of her knowledge, had hitherto been ignored by Europeans. 1. Cold casting in concrete, and 2. Hot casting or carving in molten lava. The latter method was not described to her by Hohepa Te Rake, but her previous knowledge of it was confirmed. In using wet concrete, the Stone Age man employed wooden moulds for the blocks forming the walls, etc. A suitable mixture of sand, sacred earth, cement, etc., etc. And continues from there. For control of fertility and martial efficiency. Etc. And she goes on about the Polynesian food, the taro, being chased from ancient Assyria along the following routes: westwards to Egypt, along to North Africa, down East Africa to Madagascar, along the south of Europe to Spain and Portugal, and down to the Canary Islands and Nigeria, across the Atlantic to the West Indies and tropical America. 4. From Peru across Polynesia to New Zealand. B. Eastwards. 1. To India, China, Japan and all South Asia. 2. To the East Indies and New Guinea. 3. Across Polynesia, perhaps from East Africa and Madagascar, and down to New Zealand. She's given further details, and she goes on about the ancient American civilization. Okay, we're trying to find that part where she states that the Te Arawa are actually the Iwi, the tribe, are from Assyria. Origin and migration of the New Zealand Maori, part 1. Here it is. In the next few pages, the Maori migration legends, as handed down for many generations by the elders and men of learning, would be summarized as briefly and explicitly as possible. The Holy Land, the land where mankind, Maori, was created was Assyria, or in the Te Arawa or Maori language, Irihia, the land of Western Asia. When this land became overpopulated, different sections of mankind migrated in different directions. The white Maori went to the north, the black Maori to the south, the yellow Maori to the east, and the brown New Zealand Maori to the west. There were originally 12 nations or houses of the brown Maori in Assyria, all descended from Hohepa, Jacob, and they first migrated to Egypt, where they built cities. After a time, they returned to Assyria, but a few generations later, they split into two parties. I need some information here below. The New Zealand Maori often calculates in generations, but the number of years reckoned to a generation varies. There were 134 generations from the time of the Great Migration from Assyria to the time of landing in New Zealand, and they may be tabulated thus. Assyria to Mexico, 9 generations of 35 years each. In Mexico, 44 generations of 50. From Mexico to the departure from Peru, 37 generations of 50 years from Peru to New Zealand. 12 generations of 25 years in New Zealand. Te Rake was born in 1884, Hohepa Te Rake, who relayed all this knowledge to her. 32 generations of 40 years. So we have it there. You, Te Arawa Maori, you are from Assyria, or in Maori, Irihia. Those people left there and came to New Zealand. Here's some information here on that. We go down to this part. The settlers in Mexico Mexico had long been in possession when the great white Maori came down from the north and made war upon them. When Mexico fell, the brown Maori were scattered in defeat, some going north, others to the islands in the Gulf of Mexico, others to different parts of Central America, Yucatan, etc. Many settled in Jamaica, Hawaii, or founded colonies in Guyana, Hawaii, and countries afterwards said by Europeans who have been inhabited by the Arawa tribes. Those not dispersed gathered themselves together and went south, reaching Peru, which then included a great part of South Africa. There they established themselves in the new and uninhabited land, fighting wild beasts and building up their civilization. At last, a great council was held at Titicaca, and one nation, the Arawa, decided to migrate still further west. They established a colony on Easter Island where they took roots, seeds and birds with them, especially a great stock of tubers like the taro, kumara, etc. Those are tube type plants, right? Go deep roots and they look like tubes. They're tubers, right? And the taro, the kumara, etc. For cultivation in the new land they hoped to find, the promised land. Supplies of food ran short on Easter Island, but luckily starvation was averted by the arrival of immense flocks of birds, because they kept making those statues, knocked down all the trees and kept making these rock figures. So basically there was no trees there, apparently. Manu Taraara, which came from the American mainland as plover, still go to Hawaii, distance of 3,000 miles, and the Godwit cross from New Zealand to Siberia. It should be mentioned that Titicaca became a holy place for the Maori because it was there that the sacred staff had sunk right into the earth, and the stones of remembrance were commemorated by the Maori tiki, an ornament composed of the sacred life symbols, to be described at greater length in another portion of this particular book. At Easter Island, Pito o Te Whenua, the Maori erected gigantic statues, and other memorials were raised at different islands between Easter Island and New Zealand. The strong northern currents prevented the Maori travelling directly westwards, and when they reached Tahiti, some of them sailed yet further north to Hawaii. Others made their way southward and westwards, journeyed through the South Sea Islands, where they met for the first time since leaving Assyria. The black Maori, quite a different type from themselves, physically, mentally and morally. Unlike the white Maori, the black Maori did not fight whomever they came across. So they're basically saying that all people were these different shades of Maori, right? Okay, that's their idea of it, right? Their theory, their assumption. Passing through the South sea islands and leaving monuments to mark their passage, the brown Maori ultimately reached New Zealand, some 800 strong in 7 canoes, arriving separately in different parts of the country. There they found the so-called Moriori, or Maori Uri, the descendants of the pre-human ancestor. It was assumed that these people had migrated eastwards and were the children of the dawn, whereas the Maori had always travelled towards the setting sun and were people from the farthest. Okay, it has a footnote here. As there is some misapprehension regarding the canoes of the ancient Maori, the following description from Trigae's dictionary, Sabok Arawa canoe, may be useful. This canoe is said to have been built in Rarotonga, a place on the other side of Hawaii. It is doubtful if this is the island now known as Rarotonga. Rarotonga, it's got there. Ratonga. The canoe being made of totara, a tree which does not grow in Hohepa Islands, wherever that is. The name of the forest where the trees grew was Tawhiti Nui, and they were dragged down the river Ho to the sea. The buildings are said to have included in the number Rata, Waiheroa, Ngahu, and Parata. It was the first canoe completed. Then followed the Tainui, Matatua, Takitumu, Kuru Haupo, Tukumaru, and Matawhaorua. These canoes were all hewn with the celebrated greenstone axe made from Te Pautini, the stone fish of Ngahu. The Arawa was a very large double canoe with a house on deck and was rigged with a foresail, mainsail and mizzen sail. The Arawa was burnt at Makatu by Raumati. So, to cut to the chase, Te Arawa Irihia, you are originally of the Assyrians who left that country and travelled down here, obviously different lands, etc., to New Zealand, as mentioned, different lands as mentioned. They travelled down here to New Zealand, Aoteoroa, and that is the evidence that we've just provided. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that old way, perhaps, that old belief system, right? Those old beliefs, when you merged or interbred with the original peoples of this land, or those that came here after you arrived. Again, here is the evidence as revealed and therefore written. So go back to it through us, through the Syrian nation of today. They will help you. They will guide you back to that old belief system, your original, ancient, very old belief system as Assyrian migrants who left that particular country and sailed probably many countries and then ended up in New Zealand. Go back to it through us, through the Syrian nation of today. Also, they will help you. They will guide you back. Other Maori, you are descendants of the original ancient tribes of Israel. You are descendants who travelled down here to New Zealand, Aoteoroa, and integrated with the original peoples of this land. There's a call for you to come back, return to that original, ancient, very old belief system or religion that you once knew about, the ancestors once knew about, those of the original ancient, very old Israelite religion, through their sacred books, etc. We can help you. These Jews, these Israelites can help you. Let us help you via our videos at the Ministry of the Real Truth, where we bring you the real truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in regards to that original, ancient, very old belief system. For one of us at the Ministry of the Real Truth comes from a long line of Maori chiefs, prophets, and other religious leaders, some not so popular, i.e. Brian Tamaki of Destiny Church, in New Zealand. For you are being called back to that original ancient, very old belief, or that belief system that originally was yours. No, we are not trying to coerce you or try to convince you that you must now become a member of the US cult, the Hebrew Israelites, here in New Zealand, because that is exactly what they are. They are a cult with their mistranslations, their modern Americanized or modern English Roman Catholic translations, mistranslations, bad interpolations, etc., full of errors, contradictions, revisions, with deliberate editings and false claims, etc. And they're being led by the text, not by the Spirit. Okay, that's why they're full of dislike of the Europeans, etc., etc., in the Casalite and all that sort of stuff. Fight amongst themselves. Te Arawa or Irihia, this is your call to come back to your Creator, the one true God, that of the Assyrians that you once knew, i.e. Ashur, Alaha. It's nothing to do with the Muslim Allah. Okay, this is a triune God, Alaha. Eel is the original name of God, or the Eloheem, Eloheem, which is very different from the Hebrew Eloheem. Eoshoa or Ysho Msheeka, or Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Messiah. Maori, you are descendants of the original ancient very old house of Israel. So again, this is your call back to your one true God, your belief system of old, the original ancient very old belief system of the Israelites of ancient days. We are the ministry of the real truth in New Zealand, and we bring you this message, Te Arawa, the Irihia, and the Maori house of Israel, right? Descendants of Israel, etc. Okay? Don't fall for this Mormon claim that you are of House of Jared or something like that, whatever they're trying to convince you with, because it's false. Okay? This is your original roots. Okay? We don't know about all tribes yet, but we're working on it. Maori, Iwi, Maori tribes, where did they come from? Okay? But by the looks of it, you're all descendants of the original ancient very old Israelites. Don't be fooled by people telling you, oh, Moses sailed all the way down here to New Zealand, Aoteoroa, and then he discovered these lost tribes of Israel. Don't believe that stuff, because according to the original scriptures, he actually died in the book of Exodus, etc. He was buried somewhere. The angel and the devil or something were fighting over his body, and God took him and hid him somewhere, something like that, according to the scriptures. So don't fall for that sort of garbage. Okay, trust us, the ministry of the real truth, as we bring you this message and videos to you exclusively. We don't try to pull the wool over your eyes, no huff or puff or other rubbish. We bring you the real truth, the whole truth, and nothing but that truth. So if you like this particular video,